In 1910's Buffalo, the train lantern filler's little bench is yours. Tucked near the rail yard where the evening shift waits in soot, brass, and lamplight. Settle in, and let the work find its slow pace around you. We begin beside the smell of kerosene and cold iron, where each lantern comes to your hands as a small, ordinary promise. The room is not large, but it holds the quiet weight of a working city. Buffalo breathes beyond the walls, with lake wind pressing at the windows and freight cars coupling somewhere in the dark. You hear the soft clink of wire handles, the scrape of a tin funnel, the faint tick of a clock that never seems hurried. The lanterns wait in rows, glass globes dulled by smoke, metal tops darkened by fingers. Your job is simple enough to describe and slow enough to fill a life. You take each train lantern from the rack, check its frame, lift the burner, and feel for the little reservoir below. If it is low, you fill it carefully. Not too high, because a lantern that leaks makes trouble in a coat pocket or beside a brakeman's boot. The oil moves with a quiet, heavy sound. In the 1910s Buffalo rail yards, a lantern is not decoration. It is speech. Red, green, clear, amber, and blue glass tell crews what words cannot carry across wind and steam. You know this without needing to think about it. A raised lantern, a slow swing, a held light beside the track. All of it depends on the small work your hands do here. The bench has its own weather. The air is cool near the floor and warmer near the lamps. And your sleeves hold the smell of oil even after washing. Kerosene has a sharp, clean edge at first, then a softer, greasy afterscent that settles into wood. You keep a rag nearby, folded and refolded, until it feels like old felt. The funnel is dented at the mouth. We can stay here a while, because nothing about the work asks us to hurry. You turn one lantern, then another, listening for loose parts and feeling where the bale has bent from years of use. A good lantern has balance in it. It hangs from your fingers with a steady pull, neither fragile nor grand, just ready. That readiness is the whole point. The railroad around you is large, but your corner is small. Buffalo has grain elevators, stockyards, lake boats, coal pockets, warehouses, and long fingers of track reaching toward the water. Engines arrive with frost on their valves in winter and dust on their running boards in summer. Yet here, by the filling bench, the great system narrows to wick, flame, glass, and fuel. You learn the lanterns by their wear. One has a globe scratched near the shoulder. Another has a cap that takes more pressure from your thumb. Some carry the marks of the maker, stamped into metal with a confidence that outlived many hands. Dressel, Adlake, Armspear, and other names pass through rail yards, but by touch, you know the yard's own stock. The reservoir is small, and that is part of the rhythm. A lantern has to be light enough to carry for hours, in a gloved hand, across ballast and along wet platforms. It cannot be a great tank, so you fill, trim, wipe, and set aside. Then you reach for the next one, and the next, while outside a whistle thins into the night air. There are brushes for the soot and pins for stubborn burner parts. There are boxes for spare wicks, cut to proper width, pale and dry before they drink oil. You trim a charred wick with care, because a ragged edge gives a ragged flame. The scissors are not fine scissors. They are work scissors, heavy and plain, with handles polished by many thumbs. By now, your hands understand what your mind no longer needs to explain. The globe lifts, the burner turns, the wick is raised and lowered. The reservoir accepts the spout of the little can. You pause before the oil reaches the lip. You wipe the threads. You close the lantern and hold it near your ear for a moment, listening to the small truth of it. And as the first row of Buffalo train lanterns grows ready on the shelf, we move deeper into the evening routine, where the yard itself begins asking for light. Outside, the last gray of day lies over the rails, and the Buffalo train lantern filler's work follows the change in the sky. The switchmen will need their lamps soon. The conductors will take theirs before departure, and the brakemen will want a reliable flame before climbing between cars. You can hear boots in the corridor now, slow and practical, with no ceremony in them. The rack is marked in a way everyone understands. Some lanterns are for caboose use, some for yard work, some for signals, and some for hand inspection. A clear globe lets light show plainly. A red globe holds warning. A green one gives permission, in the language the railroad has trained into every tired eye. You keep each globe where it belongs. When you clean a globe, you do it by lamplight and habit. Smoke leaves a brown veil inside the glass, especially if the wick has been too high or the oil poor. You twist the globe free and breathe carefully, because soot is fine and dry. It blackens the rag in one pass. Underneath, the glass returns to itself, faintly green or red, cool against your fingers. The lantern filling room is part storeroom, part workshop, part listening post. You hear the yard office telephone ring, muffled by walls. You hear metal wheels move slowly over points. You hear someone laugh once in the distance. Then the sound is taken back by steam and space. In work like this, your ears become another set of tools. Buffalo's rail work in the 1910s has a particular feel. It is busy, but much of it moves by waiting. Cars wait for crews wait for orders. Freight waits for papers and weather and space beside the docks. You wait too, but your waiting has a task inside it. While trains gather themselves outside, you keep the small flames prepared. The filling can has a narrow spout, darkened where oil gathers after each pour. You hold it steady with both hands when the room is cold and your fingers are stiff. In January, the metal bites the skin. In August, the air seems to hold every smell twice over: oil, dust, damp wood, hot iron, and tobacco from someone passing the open door. There is no mystery in the work, and that is why it is restful to enter. The same actions repeat until they become almost musical. Lift, look, fill, trim, wipe, close. Lift, look, fill, trim, wipe, close. Not as a chant, not as performance, but as the plain meter of a bench where everything has a place. A lantern filler must be careful, though not theatrical about it. Too much oil can spill when the lantern swings. Too little leaves a crew with a dying flame halfway through a shift. A wick cut badly can smoke, flare, or make a weak yellow light that fails in fog. So your patience is not decoration. It is the quiet material of the job. You may keep a ledger, or a chalk count, depending on the shop. How many lanterns issued? How many returned damaged? How many globes cracked? The numbers are small compared with tonnage and schedules, but they matter at the edges of work. A broken globe on a wet night can change the meaning of a signal. A dry reservoir can silence a hand. The men who collect lanterns do not always speak much. They come in with coats smelling of coal smoke and wool. Their hands may be cracked from weather, their gloves stiff at the seams. You pass a lantern across, and the exchange is brief. Still, there is trust in it. The flame they carry later has already passed through your care. We should notice how ordinary that trust is. No one frames it, and no one makes a speech. The rail yard is full of work that disappears when it is done well. Couplings hold, switches line up, paperwork travels, lamps burn. Your part belongs to that hidden order, where 1,000 small completions make the night feel possible. By the time the first crews have gone out, the room has changed. The busiest shelf is thinned. The returned lanterns sit apart, waiting for cleaning, and the bench shines in little places where oil has been wiped too often into the grain. The lamp above you hums softly if it is electric, or breathes if it is not. Either way, the shadows stay close. And when the evening traffic settles into its long rhythm, we turn back toward the returned lanterns, because the train lantern filler's work is never only filling, but also receiving what the night has used. You take the first returned lantern from the rough shelf, and its handle is still cold from the yard. A little grit falls from the frame when you set it down. The glass has a grey bloom over it, and the burner smells faintly scorched, as though the wick has been riding too high. We stay with your hands here, in the small room of the Buffalo train lantern filler, where the night comes back one lantern at a time. Returned lanterns tell you about the hours they have just lived through. One has rain spots dried across the globe. Another has cinders caught beneath the top ring. A third has a smear of axle grease near the base, left by some hurried hand near a string of freight cars. You do not need a story for each mark, but you notice them anyway, because noticing is part of the trade. The first task is to separate what is ready from what needs care. A lantern that only needs oil can go to one side. A lantern with a cracked globe must wait. A lantern with a loose burner asks for the small screwdriver that lives in the shallow drawer. You touch each part in order, and the room answers with little sounds: metal tapping wood, glass settling in its cage, the soft rasp of a rag pulled across soot. Buffalo in the 1910s is a place of arrivals, and some of those arrivals come quietly to your bench. Coal from Pennsylvania, wheat from the plains, manufactured goods, livestock, timber, lake cargo and mail all move through the region in their own seasons. The railroad men think in trains and timetables, but you often think in returns. Everything that goes out with a flame must come back for tending. We can feel the age of this work in the way the tools fit no single machine. Your funnel could have served in a farm shed. Your oil can could have stood beside a stove. Your scissors could trim cloth or wick with the same plain patience. The job sits between household care and industrial order, which is part of its strange tenderness. A train lantern is both a tool of commerce and a little household flame carried into weather. When the globe is smoky, you breathe away from it and polish slowly. The rag darkens in your hand. The soot has a dry, powdery drag, then the cloth begins to slide more smoothly as the glass clears. Red glass deepens under your thumb. Green glass takes back its cool color. Clear glass shows the bench lamp through it, wavering slightly where the old glass is uneven. There is a scent to the cleaning that belongs only to this corner of work. Kerosene, burnt wick, damp wool, cold iron, and the faint sourness of ashes all mixed together. It is not perfumed. It is not fresh. Yet once you have spent enough evenings here, the smell becomes a sign that the world is in its proper order, and that your hands still know where to begin. As the returned lanterns gather around you, the evening shift becomes less about issuing light and more about restoring it. You are still the 1910s Buffalo train lantern filler, but the work has turned inward now, from the yard's immediate need to the patient recovery of each small lamp. We follow that turn without haste, because this is where the job reveals its quiet discipline. A lantern may look sturdy, but you learn its weak places. The bail can loosen where it pivots. The wire cage can bend if a brakeman drops it from a step. The burner threads can gum with old oil. The little cap beneath the reservoir can be tightened by fingers too cold to feel their own strength. You test these places gently, with no accusation in the handling. Your bench may keep a dish for screws and pins, because small metal things love to disappear into shadows. The dish is chipped enamel or plain tin, and it rings softly when a screw drops in. Beside it lies a narrow file, a pair of pliers, and perhaps a coil of wire for small repairs. You are not a machinist, not in the grand sense, but you mend what the night has loosened. The wick is the small heart of the lantern, cotton woven flat, pale when new, black and brittle when spent. It carries fuel upward by its own quiet habit. You draw it through the burner with your fingertips, feeling for stiffness. If it is charred, you trim it level. If it is short, you replace it. The cut edge matters, because flame takes the shape you leave for it. You can imagine the small flame later, though you are not outside to see it. It will lean in wind. It will brighten when a man raises the lantern. It will hide for an instant behind a sleeve, then show again beneath falling snow or mist from the river. The flame begins here, in the wick you trim, in the reservoir you fill, in the glass you make clean enough to speak through darkness. Some lanterns carry colored globes for signals that every yard hand has learned by repetition. Red tells caution and stopping. Green can mean proceed, depending on the rule and the railroad. Blue often marks equipment that must not be moved, because someone may be working on or under it. You handle blue glass with a particular quietness, aware that this color can stand between labor and harm. The buffalo train lantern filler knows the railroad's language through objects rather than speeches. You may not stand on the platform calling orders. You may not write train sheets or pull the throttle of an engine. Still, you prepare the little lights by which distance becomes readable. Across a yard full of smoke and steam, a colored flame can be more legible than a shouted word. The room cools as the evening deepens. Your knuckles feel it first. Oil thickens slightly in its can, not enough to stop the pour, only enough to make the movement feel slower. The floorboards hold the chill from outside. Somewhere down the corridor, a stove ticks and settles, and the smell of warm dust comes and goes whenever a door opens. This is the sort of work that makes time round at the edges. You do not watch each minute pass. You watch the level in a reservoir rise. The blackness leave a globe. The wick come clean beneath the scissors. When you are tired, you do not become grandly tired. You become quietly steady, as though the rhythm of the bench has taken some of your weight for you. And when the damaged lanterns have been sorted from the rest, we move toward the small repairs, where the reasons for the job's eventual fading begin to hide in plain sight. The buffalo train lantern filler is still needed tonight, but already the world around the bench is learning other ways to make light. For now, though, your pliers wait in your hand, and the first bent frame comes toward you. You lay the bent lantern on a square of old cloth, so it will not slide. The frame has taken a blow, perhaps against a ladder or the corner of a freight car. You press the wire cage back a little at a time. It does not need to be beautiful. It needs to protect the globe, hold the burner square, and let the lantern hang without twisting. A small repair has a sound all its own. Pliers click softly. Wire creaks. A screw turns with a dry chirp before it loosens. The bench lamp reflects in the curve of the globe, and your own hands appear there, rounded and shadowy, moving with care. We stay close to that reflection, because it tells the truth of many quiet jobs. The work is humble, and the attention is exact. The railroads of the 1910s loved standard parts when they could get them. Standard gauges, standard couplers, standard signal colors, standard time, standard paperwork, and standard stores all helped the vast machine behave. Yet the lanterns at your bench still feel individual. They have dents, habits, mismatched screws, and old repairs. Industry wants sameness, while use keeps leaving personal marks. You may keep spare globes wrapped in paper or stacked in a crate with straw, depending on the shop's habits. They are not handled carelessly. Glass costs money, and a colored globe is more than a pretty object. You lift one by the rim and feel its cool thickness. In winter, it almost seems to hold the cold longer than metal. In lamplight, the color lies quiet until flame wakes it. When a globe is cracked, you do not argue with it. A crack spreads under heat and shock. It can cut a hand or fail when the lantern is needed. So you remove it, set it aside and fit another, lowering it into the frame with the same care you might give a cup into a cupboard at night. Your hands do not rush glass. They have learned better. The burner is a more stubborn matter. Old oil can leave varnish, and dirt can gather where the wick passes through. You work the little wheel gently, feeling whether the wick rises evenly. If it catches, you do not force it. You remove the wick, clear the slot, and wipe away the dark gum with a rag that smells stronger after each pass. This kind of maintenance once belonged to countless places. Ships, barns, factories, stations, streetworks, mines, hotels, and homes all needed people who understood flame as a daily companion. The buffalo train lantern filler was part of that wider age, when light required tending. Before a room could glow at the touch of a switch, someone trimmed, filled, cleaned, guarded, and carried the light. We should not make that older world too romantic. It was smoky, it stained clothes, it burned fingers if handled foolishly, and it required storage rooms where fuel had to be treated with respect. But it also made care visible. Every lamp showed whether someone had done the small work. Every clear globe and steady flame carried a trace of a person who had prepared it. A railroad yard gives no applause for this. It gives function. A lantern burns, and a crew uses it. A signal is seen, and a car moves or stays. A man finds his footing along ballast because the circle of light falls where it should. Your name does not travel with the beam. It does not need to. The work has reached its destination when nobody thinks of it. There may be a stool, though you do not always sit. Sitting changes the angle of your shoulders, and after long enough, standing feels cleaner for the hands. You shift weight from one foot to the other. The floor has darker patches, where oil, rainwater, and boot dirt have made a kind of map. Under the bench, old drops of fuel have dried into dull stains. Now and then, a supervisor or clerk may step in, carrying paper or impatience from another room. The railroad has many voices, some brisk and some weary. Your corner receives them softly. A question about how many clear lanterns remain, a note about a cracked red globe, a reminder that an extra set is needed for a late freight. You answer, and your hands return to the bench. The loss of this job will not come all at once, and that matters. The Buffalo train lantern filler will not wake one morning to find every flame gone from the rail yard. Instead, the need will thin. More fixed electric lamps will appear. Better yard lighting will spread over platforms and switches. Signals will become larger, brighter, and more mechanical. The little hand lantern will remain, but its world will shrink. For now, the world has not shrunk enough. Outside, men still lift lanterns in dark air, and cars still move by the language of swinging light. You continue the repairs because tonight requires them. The future can wait at the edge of the room. It waits quietly, in wires, batteries, lamps on poles, and new rules printed in clean type. And as the repaired lanterns begin to rejoin the ready shelf, we pass into the middle hours, when the Buffalo yard settles into night work and your own routine becomes almost invisible. The room feels deeper now, less like a place at the edge of a shift, and more like a small harbor for objects that keep returning. You wipe your hands, reach for the next lantern, and let the repetition carry you. The middle hours have a softened sound. Even in a busy rail yard, night changes the edges of noise. Couplings still strike, engines still breathe, and wheels still complain along curves. But distance seems to wrap each sound in cloth. From the lantern room, you hear the yard as layers, near footsteps, far whistles, a door latch, a muttered exchange. Then the long hush after movement. A Buffalo winter night can make every surface feel older. Frost gathers near window seams. Breath shows briefly when the door stands open too long. Your oil can sweat cold into your palm. The lantern frames brought in from outside sting the skin before they warm under your fingers. Yet the lamp over the bench makes a small pool of amber, and you work inside it as though beside a stove. In summer, the same room becomes heavy in another way. Dust clings to sweat at the wrist. The smell of kerosene rises more quickly. Flies worry at the window, ticking against glass in the late light before night takes them quiet. The city beyond the yard holds the heat of brick and rail. You move more slowly then, because the air itself seems to ask for patience. We keep both seasons in mind, because the job belongs to all weather. A train lantern filler does not exist only in a pleasant evening. You are here when lake wind pushes rain under coats. You are here when thaw makes mud around the tracks. You are here when snow turns the yard pale and soundless at the edges. The lanterns come back with those seasons written on them. Your own clothing carries the work too. A dark apron, perhaps, heavy sleeves, shoes with grit in the seams, a cap set aside on a peg or left on your head because the room is cold. The cuffs of your shirt have oil shadows that never quite leave. Even after washing, a faint smell follows you, not unpleasant exactly, just faithful. There may be a pail of sand nearby, or another plain means of dealing with spills. Fuel is ordinary, but never careless. You cap the can when you are not pouring. You keep rags where they belong. You do not let flame and oil meet outside their proper places. This caution becomes part of the rhythm, as natural as lowering the burner and checking the latch. A returned lantern sometimes holds a little warmth near the burner. You feel it before you see it. The metal has not fully forgotten the flame. You let it cool, or handle it by parts that stayed away from heat. Such details are learned in the body. No one has to say them twice. The fingers remember what instruction once told them. The buffalo train lantern filler works among small thresholds, empty and filled, dirty and clean, safe and unready, issued and returned, broken and serviceable. These are modest divisions, but they keep the work clear. When the world outside feels large, there is comfort in a bench where each object asks a question you can answer with your hands. If your meal waits nearby, it is wrapped simply. Bread, cold meat, cheese, an apple, coffee in a tin cup if you are fortunate, perhaps something brought from home and eaten in pauses. You do not leave the smell of food near the oil if you can help it. You step aside, sit for a few minutes, and listen while the yard continues without consulting you. There is a loneliness to the room, but not an empty one. It is the kind of solitude that comes with useful work nearby. People pass through, take what they need, leave what they have used, and trust you to hold the cycle together. You are alone in stretches, but your work is threaded into many hands. We can rest in that thought, because it is gentle and true. The ledger, if you keep one, grows slowly across the page. Words and marks stand in for objects handled with skin and breath. Clear lantern issued, red globe replaced, burner repaired, wicks cut, oil drawn. The handwriting may be blunt from a working pencil. The paper may have a smudge where your thumb was not quite clean. Even records have texture here. A job can be lost long before the objects vanish completely. It begins when fewer hands are needed for the same work. A larger storeroom can centralize supplies. A newer lantern can be easier to maintain. A battery lamp, once dependable enough, can remove wick trimming from the evening altogether. Electric yard lights can make some hand signals less central. Change arrives as convenience, one small saving at a time. Still, in the 1910s, the older rhythm holds. The railroad is modern and old-fashioned at once. Telegraph wires run beside tracks, and steam locomotives burn coal in great iron bodies, while your bench still uses rags, funnels, cotton wicks, and flame. This is one reason the buffalo train lantern filler is worth lingering with. The job stands where ages overlap, and when your short meal is finished and the cup has gone cool, we return to the shelf of lanterns that are ready for the later cruise. The night is not over, and the buffalo yard still has movements to make before morning. You brush crumbs from your coat, wipe your fingers, and take up the next task with the calm of someone who knows the order of things. The ready shelf gives a quiet satisfaction. Lanterns stand there with their globes clear, reservoirs filled, and handles aligned. They are not polished for a parade, they are prepared for use. The difference matters. Work objects should not look too precious. They should look capable, and these do, sitting in their row with a faint oil smell rising from them. A brakeman steps in and asks for 2 clear and 1 red. His voice is low, because the room makes loudness feel unnecessary. You hand them over by the handle, one at a time, and he checks them with the quick habits of his own trade. He may strike a match to test one, or he may trust the preparation and go. Either way, the lanterns leave your circle of light. When a match touches the wick, the flame first appears small and blue at the base, then gathers itself into yellow. The glass warms around it. The metal top begins to breathe out a thin smell of heat. If the wick is right, the flame steadies without smoking. You watch for that steadiness. A good flame should not shout. It should simply hold. The color of a lit globe is richer than the color of glass alone. Red becomes deep and wet-looking, like a coal seen through ash. Green takes on a cool, signal clarity. Clear glass throws a warmer circle onto the wall. In the yard, those colors will move in darkness like thoughts made visible. At your bench, they are still close enough to touch. We should notice the body language of men receiving light. They do not cradle the lanterns like delicate things, yet they do not toss them either. They know the weight. They know the swing. A lantern is meant to be carried, lifted, hung from a hook, set on ballast, or held beside the body while stepping between rails. The object teaches a practical respect. In the Buffalo Train lantern room, every handle has been held by many kinds of weather. Gloves stiff with ice, bare hands in summer heat, hands blackened by coal dust, hands reddened by soap and cold water. You feel that history in the smooth places where metal has been rubbed by use. The lantern is an archive of touch, though no one in the yard would call it that. The job itself is an archive too. It preserves knowledge that seems too simple to write down fully. How high to fill when the night is cold, how much wick to show for a clean burn, how to smell bad oil before it causes trouble, how to hear a loose globe in the frame. These things live in you because repetition has made a home for them. There are reasons such work disappears from memory. It leaves few monuments. A locomotive may be photographed, named, and admired. A station may become a postcard. A bridge may keep its date cast into iron, but a filling bench can be cleared in an afternoon. A rack can be taken down. The rags can be thrown out. The oil cans can be sold or forgotten. That is one answer to why we lost the 1910s Buffalo Train lantern filler. The job was made of maintenance, and maintenance is often remembered only when it fails. When better systems came, they did not need to defeat the bench in a grand contest. They only needed to reduce the number of lanterns, then the number of fills, then the need for a person whose whole rhythm belonged to flame. Yet we do not rush toward that loss. We let it come slowly, as it did. Tonight, there are still lanterns to issue. There are still returns to clean. There is still oil to pour, wick to trim, glass to polish, and a little ledger line to mark before the hour passes. You are still needed by the small lights, and that is enough for this room. A late freight may require extra lamps, especially if crews change or cars must be moved in dark sidings. The request comes with a knock, then a face in the doorway. You turn from the bench and reach for the shelf without needing to search. The right lantern is where your hand expects it. That simple certainty is one of the quiet pleasures of ordered work. When the door opens, cold air travels across the room like a shallow wave. It carries coal smoke, wet wood, iron, and the faint mineral smell of snow if the season is right. For a few seconds, the flame in the bench lamp trembles. Papers stir, then the door closes, and the room folds back into its own warmth. You return to the object before you, and as the late shift draws the ready lanterns into the yard, we move toward the place where supply meets habit, where the oil itself becomes part of the story. A train lantern filler in Buffalo does not only handle lamps. You handle the fuel chain in miniature, the stored liquid light that came from refinery, barrel, can, and careful pouring. The next reservoir waits open beneath your hand. Kerosene had already changed the world before it came to your bench. It gave many homes and work sites a steadier, brighter light than older oils could easily provide. It traveled in cans, barrels, tanks, and storerooms, becoming ordinary through use. By the 1910s, it was familiar enough that people forgot how remarkable it was. Familiar things often become invisible first. The fuel in your can is pale and clear, with a faint oily shimmer when the light catches it. It moves more slowly than water, and it leaves a slick shine if it touches the bench. You do not splash it. You pour close to the opening, guiding the spout with attention. A small gurgle rises from the reservoir as air leaves and fuel takes its place. The smell has layers. Fresh kerosene is sharp enough to wake the nose, but old lantern fuel carries soot, metal, and cloth along with it. Your rag smells different by the end of the shift than it did at the beginning. Your fingertips, even after wiping, seem to hold a ghost of the oil. It is one of those work scents that follows you quietly into sleep. In a large railroad operation, supplies are counted, ordered, stored, and watched. Nothing as plain as fuel escapes paperwork for long. Oil costs money, globes cost money, wicks cost money, lost lanterns cost money and create questions. The railroad's appetite is enormous, And your small room is one of many places where that appetite is measured in pint, quart, crate, box, and line. You may receive oil from a larger storage area rather than from a single household can. Someone fills the smaller cans used at benches like yours. Barrels may stand in a separate space, away from flame and traffic, with their own rules and smells. Even here, in the intimate rhythm of your hands, the industrial system remains present. The fuel has traveled farther than you have tonight. The Buffalo rail yards sit in a city shaped by movement. Grain arrives by lake and rail. Steel, coal, lumber, meat, flour, machinery, and people pass through. The lantern room is tiny beside all of that, yet it belongs to the same circulation. You pour oil into a reservoir, and the yard can continue speaking after dark. The small act joins the large motion without calling attention to itself. This is why the loss feels almost too quiet to notice. A job tied to a single kind of tool can fade when the tool changes. If lanterns need less frequent filling, the filler has less work. If central electric lights brighten the yard, fewer hand lamps are issued. If electric or battery lanterns become reliable and affordable enough, the wick, burner, and reservoir step backward in the daily order. Battery lamps did not make every old lantern vanish overnight. Early batteries had their own weight, cost, and care. They needed charging, storage, replacement, and trust built through use. Railroads are cautious with signal equipment, as they should be. A flame that everyone understands can outlast newer devices for a long while. But the direction is there, faint at first like a wire laid in shadow. Electricity also changed the feeling of night work. A fixed lamp on a pole does not need a wick trimmed by your hand. A signal lamp wired into a system does not come back smelling of smoke. A platform lit by electric fixtures asks for different maintenance, higher on ladders, behind switches and fuses, in bulbs and circuits. Light moves away from the bench and into infrastructure. We can sit with that word, infrastructure, and soften it back into its pieces. Poles, wires, switch boxes, glass bulbs, sockets, transformers humming somewhere beyond ordinary hearing, men with ladders and tool belts, storerooms with different parts. The work does not disappear from the world. It changes location, changes hands, changes smell, and leaves the lantern filler with fewer objects returning at night. For now, though, the kerosene can is still central. You lift it, pour, pause, and wipe the lip. The rag passes around the reservoir threads. You close the cap firmly, not harshly. The lantern returns upright. It has gained only a little weight, but that small weight is hours of light. You know the feel of enough, and your hand stops there. A careless fill leaves evidence. A wet seam, a slick base, a smell stronger than it should be. You catch these signs before the lantern leaves. A crew member should not discover your mistake by finding fuel on his glove. So you wipe again, not with irritation, but with the calm exactness that keeps work decent. Good maintenance is often a second look, and after the oil cans are capped and set back in their place, we follow the lanterns outward again, not by leaving your bench entirely, but by listening to the yard they serve. The 1910s Buffalo train lantern filler works indoors, yet the meaning of the task is always outside, moving across rails under a low sky. You hear that meaning each time a door opens. The yard at night is not dark in one simple way. It has patches of gaslight, electric light, lantern light, engine glow, and the faint shine of wet rails. Steam drifts and catches whatever light it can. Coal smoke smears the air. A brakeman's lantern moves like a warm bead through the gray. From your room, you do not see all of this at once, but you know it by sound and return. A locomotive standing under steam has its own breathing. The pop of a valve, the soft roar under the firebox, the clank of a shovel if the fireman is working coal. The engine's lamps are not your little hand lanterns, but they belong to the same family of tended light. Someone has cleaned their glass, filled or checked their oil where needed, and made them ready for distance. Freight cars do not care for light, but people among them do. The spaces between cars are narrow and shadowed. Couplers are dark shapes until a lantern shows their edges. Brake wheels stand at heights that the hand remembers. Steps are slick in rain. A small flame cannot make the whole yard safe, but it can make the next few feet readable, and sometimes that is what work requires. Your lanterns are used in gestures, not just for seeing. A circle, a swing, a hold, a slow lift, a side movement, all can carry meaning under the proper rules. The flame becomes a handmade brighter. The globe gives color to instruction. When you fill and clean these lamps, you are preparing tools of visibility and tools of speech at the same time. The buffalo train lantern filler is, in that quiet sense, part of the railroad's conversation. You do not shout across the tracks, yet every good wick gives another worker a voice at a distance. Every clean globe lets that voice keep its color. We can feel the gentleness of that connection without making it grand. It is enough to be useful. Sometimes a lantern returns with the wick turned too high, its chimney suited dark. Perhaps the user wanted more light than the lamp could give cleanly. Perhaps wind made the flame misbehave. Perhaps the burner was already tired. You do not scold the absent hand. You clean the evidence, trim the wick, and restore the lamp to what it can honestly do. That phrase, what it can honestly do, belongs to many old tools. A hand lantern cannot become a searchlight. A wick cannot burn without fuel. A globe cannot signal if soot hides its color. Knowing limits is part of working well. You learn not to ask more of the object than its design can provide. In return, it gives steady service. Modern loss often begins when another tool can do more with less tending. An electric lamp can burn brighter for longer if the system behind it holds. A fixed signal can be read at distance and tied into track circuits and dispatching rules. A battery lantern can avoid open flame in places where fuel and sparks are unwelcome. Each improvement carries its own plain reason, but every improvement changes the shape of a working day. The old lantern filler loses not just tasks, but pauses, judgments, scents, and gestures. No more trimming a wick by lamplight. No more checking the color of a globe against a smoky room. No more knowing by weight whether the reservoir is full enough. The knowledge does not become false. It becomes less often needed. You may not think of this while working. Most workers do not narrate history to themselves as they wipe a thread or tighten a screw. You think about the next lantern, the next request, the cold near the door, the line in the ledger, the stubborn burner, the cup you have not yet washed. History gathers later around actions that once felt too ordinary to name, and as the night leans toward its deepest hours, we return to the inner life of the routine, where fatigue makes the familiar motions softer rather than sharper. The buffalo train lantern filler's bench is quieter now, but not empty. A few returned lamps wait for morning. A few must be ready before dawn. You stand between those needs, steady and unhurried. There is a special silence after the last rush of a shift. Not true silence, because the railroad never becomes wholly still, but a lower layer of sound. The hurried footsteps thin out. The door opens less often. The clock seems louder. The lamp above the bench makes a small circle where dust shows itself, rising and falling as though breathing with the room. Your hands may ache a little at the base of the thumb. The motion of twisting burners and lifting bales is small, but repetition leaves its mark. Your shoulders know the height of the bench. Your back knows the slight forward lean. You straighten now and then, looking at the shelves without really seeing them. Then the next lantern comes forward, and the body resumes its quiet agreement. A cloth used all evening becomes heavy with work. It darkens, stiffens in places, and carries the mingled smell of oil and soot. You fold it to find a cleaner patch. You keep the dirtiest corner away from clear glass. This is not delicate work in the usual sense, yet it asks for delicacy. A harsh wipe can smear more than it removes. The room's objects have settled into their own positions. The oil can at your right. Spare wicks near the drawer. Globes above or below, depending on the rack. The dish of screws. The ledger, the pail. The stool. Once you know the room, darkness itself would not fully confuse you. Your hand could find the rag by memory, and the funnel by its cool rim. That intimacy with place is one of the things we lose when a job disappears. The worker's knowledge was not only about the lanterns. It was about where the floor dipped, which shelf sagged, which latch stuck, which can poured cleanly, which drawer needed lifting before it opened. Such knowledge rarely enters manuals. It lives in repeated evenings, and then it goes quiet. The 1910s Buffalo Train lantern filler belongs to a world that respected routine because routine kept the great machinery from fraying. Work did not become meaningful only when unusual events occurred. The ordinary pass, repeated correctly, held the yard together. You can feel that in the simple act of setting a lantern back into line, handle facing out, ready for the next hand. If snow is falling, the returned lanterns bring small beads of water that melt on the bench. If rain is falling, they come in slick and dark. If the night is dry and windy, dust gathers under the cap. Every weather leaves a signature. You wipe them away, but you also read them, as though the lanterns have been out walking and have come home with news. A cracked globe can be wrapped for disposal or saved until the proper account is made. Railroads dislike unexplained loss. So do storekeepers. You may mark it down, noting color and perhaps cause if known. Red globe cracked, clear globe broken, burner replaced. Such phrases look dull on paper, yet each one began as a real object, making a small hard sound under someone's hand. There is no need to dramatize broken glass. It is simply part of the cycle. A lantern travels through weather and rough use, so some parts fail. Your task is to notice failure before the next use depends on it. That is the quiet morality of maintenance. It accepts wear without surprise and answers wear with care. The old oil lantern asks for this again and again. It asks to be cleaned because flame makes smoke. It asks to be filled because fuel is consumed. It asks for wick because cotton burns away. It asks for glass because yards are rough places. Newer technologies will ask different things, and perhaps fewer things from this bench. That is how a job begins to lose its shape. Still, the shape is full tonight. You trim another wick and set the blackened sliver aside. It curls slightly, brittle and dark. Your fingers find a fresh length in the drawer. The new cotton feels dry and soft, with a woven grain that catches lightly against the skin. You thread it through the burner, turn the little wheel, and watch it rise in a neat pale line. A good wick sits straight. You cut it evenly, then lower it until only the proper edge shows. Too much wick will smoke. Too little will starve the flame. The judgment is small, but the eye learns it. In a life of repeated tasks, the eye gathers measures that no ruler needs to confirm. Enough becomes something you can see. And when the last damaged lantern of the hour is made serviceable, we follow the job toward the coming morning, where the night's returns begin to meet the day's first requirements. Buffalo before dawn has its own color, neither night nor day, and the train lantern filler feels that change indoors, before the sun reaches the windows. The air loosens slightly, and the clocks seem to lean forward. Before dawn, rail yards often prepare rather than rest. Trains due out in early light must be supplied. Crews arrive with sleep still in their faces. Yard offices brighten. Stoves are shaken down or fed. Somewhere, coffee is poured into cups that warm cold hands. Your room receives this change through footsteps, voices, and the increasing frequency of the door. The lanterns for morning are still needed, though dawn will soon lighten the sky. Early work begins before full daylight, and fog, smoke, sheds, tunnels, and shaded tracks can make a lantern useful long after sunrise. You do not assume the sun will do your job for you. You prepare the lamps because the yard has learned to ask for readiness before need becomes visible. A pale stripe shows at the window if your room has one. It turns the glass globes duller than they looked by lamp alone. Red becomes brownish. Green becomes quiet. Clear glass shows fingerprints you missed, and you wipe them away with patient resignation. Morning light is less forgiving than lamplight, but not unkind. It simply reveals what remains. Your own tiredness changes under morning. At night, it feels wrapped around you. Near dawn, it becomes more practical. You think of the end of shift, of washing your hands, of stepping out into air that smells of smoke and bread from nearby streets. But the work is not finished just because you can imagine leaving. The next lantern waits, and you answer it. The Buffalo Train lantern filler may work a shift arranged by the yard's needs rather than by the comfort of the body. Some shops would divide duties among several workers. Some might give lantern care as part of broader storeroom work. In memory, roles blur because real workplaces often did not fit tidy labels. Yet the task itself remains clear. Keep the portable railroad lights ready. That is another reason such jobs are lost to history. They were sometimes duties inside other titles. A lampman, storekeeper, yard helper, watchman, or cleaner might share the work. The specific hand that filled lanterns may not appear in a city directory or a photograph caption, but the lanterns did not fill themselves. Someone stood at a bench like this and made the night usable. We keep calling you the Buffalo Train lantern filler because the phrase gathers the task back from the margins. It gives a name to the worker at the bench, even if the payroll used another word. It lets us stay with the daily action rather than only the famous machinery outside. A railroad is more than engines. It is also the care of small flames before dawn. The morning issue has its own pace. Men arrive less like shadows now, more like figures with faces and collars and breath in the cold. They ask for lamps, return broken ones, mention a faulty burner, complain mildly about weather, or say nothing beyond what is needed. Their boots carry cinders onto the threshold. Their voices leave the room as quickly as they came. You may test a few lanterns before handing them out. A match flares, sulfur briefly sharp in the air, then the wick takes. You turn it down, watch the flame steady, and blow it out if it is only a test. The smoke rises in a thin thread. It smells bitter, then vanishes into the larger smell of the room. The spent match goes where spent matches belong. The lantern returns to the shelf, or passes to a hand. Such small endings fill the morning. A cap tightened, a ledger closed halfway, a rag hung to dry or set aside. The oil can checked for level, the drawer pushed shut with the hip because both hands are full. Work consists of these quiet completions. As daylight grows, some lanterns become less urgent, and fixed structures take over more of the seeing. Windows brighten. Yard lamps are extinguished or ignored. Signals stand clearer against the sky. The hand lantern's authority softens in ordinary daylight, though it never disappears entirely. A dark corner, a shed, a storm, or a rule may call it back at any hour. This daily fading of lantern light hints at the larger historical fading. Every morning, flame yields a little to sun. Over years, it yields to electric yards, improved signal systems, battery lamps, and changes in operating practice. The loss is repeated in miniature each day. The lantern burns when needed, then grows unnecessary in brightness, then waits again for dark. You understand this in the body before anyone names it as progress. Light is always conditional. It matters most where darkness has work to do. When darkness retreats, the lantern rests. When technology pushes darkness back more permanently, the filler's bench loses some of its old central place. Not because the work was foolish, but because its conditions changed. And as morning comes fully into the Buffalo Yard, we turn toward the records and routines that made the job part of a larger system, not just a private craft beside a bench. The lanterns may feel personal in your hand, but the railroad counts them as equipment, and equipment travels through forms, shelves, inspections, and rules. You reach for the ledger again, and the pencil is worn flat on one side. The page has columns that bring order to objects: date, number, color, condition, issue, return, repair, perhaps initials or notes. The exact form depends on the company and the shop, but the purpose is familiar. The railroad wants to know where its things are. It wants loss reduced, supplies ordered before shortage, and damaged equipment identified before trouble moves out onto the track. Your handwriting has to remain readable even when your hands smell of oil. You pause before touching the page if your fingers are damp. A smudge can turn a number into a question. The pencil leaves a soft gray line that feels quieter than ink. You press a little harder on cold mornings. The wood of the pencil is chewed near the end, perhaps by you, perhaps by someone before you. The records do not capture the room's warmth, or the smell of kerosene, or the way a green globe feels heavier on a tired wrist. They do not record the little satisfaction of a burner turning freely after cleaning. They reduce the work to entries, because entries are what a railroad office can hold. Yet without the living work, the entries would mean nothing at all. A storekeeper may compare your counts with stock. Spare wicks decline. Globes must be ordered. Fuel usage rises in longer winter nights and falls with summer light. Accidents, weather, busy freight seasons, and changes in traffic all leave traces in supplies. You may not study these patterns as a scholar would, but your hands feel them. Some weeks simply use more of everything. Buffalo's railway life in the 1910s could be dense with companies, yards, and connections. The New York Central, the Erie, the Lackawanna, the Lehigh Valley, and other lines all moved through the region in their own ways. Each had practices, property, and habits. Yet across company names, a lantern man has not a lantern remained a lantern in the hand of someone working after dark. The title may vary from place to place: lampman, lantern man, storehouse attendant, yard helper. The named job of train lantern filler may sit inside several of these, but the task itself is steady enough for us to inhabit. You receive the lantern, you inspect it, you fill it, you clean it, you make it ready for another worker's night. This is how many old jobs vanish twice. First, they vanish from the workplace because technology and organization alter the need. Then they vanish from language because their names were never widely printed or cherished. People remember conductors and engineers more easily than the person who kept hand lanterns serviceable. The visible roles keep their outlines. The supporting roles become shadows behind them. We are not here to pull those shadows into brightness too sharply. This is still a quiet room, and the work still moves at its own pace. But there is comfort in naming what was almost unnamed. The Buffalo Train lantern filler stands for all those small jobs that once made larger systems feel seamless, one prepared object at a time. The ledger may hold evidence of transition before anyone says the old era is gone. Fewer kerosene fills over time. More notes about electric lamps, different stock numbers, battery parts appearing in another drawer. The old entries continue for a while beside the new. Workplaces rarely change in a clean line. They layer one method over another until habit finally shifts. If a new electric lantern appears, it may be regarded with curiosity, suspicion, or relief, depending on who holds it. It has no wick to trim and no open flame to shield. It may be heavier in a different way. Its light may be steady but colder. It asks for charged cells instead of fuel. It has its own failures, its own maintenance, its own shelf. You might handle such a lamp eventually, and your knowledge would adjust. Workers do this. They learn what the job requires now, not only what it required before. Yet something in the old rhythm would loosen. The smell of oil would lessen. The rag would darken more slowly. The drawer of wicks would sit longer between orders. The lantern filling bench would no longer be the center it had been. The loss, then, is not simply that a job ended. It is that a sensory world thinned out. The scrape of wick scissors, the oil can's glug, the warm soot on glass, the exact lift of a burner, the row of filled lamps waiting like quiet stars on a shelf. These things made a working atmosphere. When they faded, a certain kind of evening faded with them. And when the ledger is brought up to date and the morning issue has slowed, we remain a little longer with the objects themselves, because they have more to tell under your hands. The Buffalo Train lantern filler does not think only in systems and trends. You think in hinges, threads, caps, globes, and the feel of a lamp made ready. The next lantern is dented near the base, and you turn it toward the light. The dent is shallow, but it changes how the reservoir sits on the bench. You press the lantern gently, testing whether it rocks. A rocking lantern can spill if filled carelessly or set down too quickly. You inspect the seam for leaks. The metal is dark but not cracked. You decide it can remain in service, though you make a small note, because memory alone should not carry every detail. The surface of old japanned or painted metal has a particular feel when worn. Smooth where hands have passed, rough where heat and weather have lifted the finish, slightly greasy even when wiped clean, because oil finds its way into every tiny irregularity. Your thumb can tell a new scrape from an old one. New damage has a sharper edge. A lantern's top may carry stamped letters, and those letters catch grime in their hollows. Patent dates, maker names, railroad initials, or model marks may be present. You do not linger over them as a collector might. To you, they are simply part of the object. Still, they remind us that even this humble lamp traveled through design shops, factories, purchasing offices, freight cars, storerooms, and finally, your bench. The factory that made the lantern had its own workers, each with repetitive tasks of cutting, pressing, forming, assembling, finishing, packing. Before you filled the reservoir, someone shaped the frame, someone fitted the burner, someone made the globe. Industrial life is full of hands passing work forward. By the time the lantern reaches you, many routines have already settled into its metal. Glass making for globes required heat and skill, whether by molding or other methods suited to production. Colored glass was not merely decoration. It had to transmit a signal color that workers could trust. Too dim, too pale, too easily confused, and the lamp would fail its purpose. In your room, that larger craft becomes simple care. Do not crack it, do not cloud it, keep it clean. The wick, too, began far away from the bench. Cotton grown, spun, woven, cut, packed, and shipped becomes a strip in your drawer. Fuel drawn from petroleum, refined, barreled, and delivered becomes a small pool in a reservoir. The lantern filler stands at the last intimate point before all those materials become working light. You bring distant processes together in one careful object. This thought need not wake us too much. It can remain soft. Every ordinary tool is a meeting place of distant labor, and your hand is only the latest hand. The bench becomes a quiet crossing of fields, refineries, factories, warehouses, rail lines, and night air. You do not need to hold all that at once. You only need to fit the wick and close the cap. When the lantern is ready, you place it with the others. Its dent remains, but it will serve. Many working things serve while imperfect. A scratch does not end usefulness. A darkened handle still lifts. A patched frame still protects the globe. The railroad is full of such practical forgiveness, where appearance yields to function and function earns another shift. That too may have helped the old job last. Flame lanterns were repairable in familiar ways. Parts could be replaced. Problems could be seen, smelled, touched, and often solved at a bench. Newer technologies sometimes moved failure into sealed parts, circuits, cells, or specialized repair. They brought advantages, certainly, but they changed the worker's relationship with the object. You could open an oil lantern and understand much of it at a glance. Reservoir, wick, burner, draft, globe, frame. Each part had a plain duty. If the flame smoked, you had a place to begin. If the light failed, you checked fuel and wick. If the color was dull, you cleaned glass. The chain between cause and remedy was short enough for tired hands. A battery lantern asks different questions. Is the cell charged? Is the contact clean? Is the bulb sound? Is there corrosion? Is the switch failing? These are not impossible questions, but they belong to another kind of maintenance. The smell changes from kerosene to metal, acid, rubber, or dust. The rag gives way to terminals. The wick scissors become less central. The buffalo train lantern filler was lost partly because the old questions became less common, not because nobody valued careful hands, but because the objects that asked for those hands were replaced, reduced, or reassigned. Work is often lost when its questions stop arriving at the same door. The bench waits, but fewer lanterns come back. For now, the questions still arrive. This burner sticks. This globe smokes. This reservoir is low. This handle is bent. This lamp needs to go out on the next local freight. You answer each one in turn. There is comfort in being able to answer. The work may be small, but it is clear, and clarity has its own warmth. And as the morning settles into full grey light, we follow the routine beyond the bench, into the storage shelves and supply corners that surround the Buffalo Train lantern filler's day. The room is more than a work surface. It is a little system of readiness, with every shelf arranged so that night can ask and receive. You step back from the bench and look over what remains. The shelves show the condition of the shift in a language your eyes know well. Full rows mean the yard has not yet drawn heavily on them. Empty spaces mean crews are out. Work is moving and light has gone where it is needed. Spare globes sit wrapped or nested. Wicks lie in their packet and the oil stock waits away from the bench. The Buffalo Train lantern filler reads this quiet inventory the way a station agent reads a timetable. You straighten a handle so it faces outward, because a lantern needed in haste should not make a hand fumble. You bring the red globes together and keep the clear ones where they can be found quickly. The green and blue lamps have their own places, not because the room is grandly organized, but because mistakes in color can travel farther than the room itself. Order is a kind of kindness here. The shelf boards are scarred by years of metal bases sliding in and out. Oil has darkened some patches until the wood looks almost polished. Dust gathers at the back where hands rarely reach, but the front edge is clean from use. If you run your fingers along it, you feel shallow grooves and old splinters worn down by repetition. Even the shelf has been trained by work. A storeroom corner may hold new lanterns still stiff in their finish. They look a little too formal before the yard marks them. Their frames are even, their caps tight, their globes clear, their handles not yet polished by gloves and weather. You inspect them without sentiment. Soon enough, they will have scratches, soot, and identity. Work turns equipment into something the hand can recognize. The older lanterns are easier to know. One lid closes with a little sideways pressure. Another has a bail that never sits perfectly straight. A third has a burner wheel that turns more smoothly than all the rest. These differences are not flaws unless they interfere with use. They are the minor personalities of tools, and you accept them in the same way you accept a familiar stair that creaks. We can pause with the storage because it shows how much of the job is anticipation. You are not only answering what has happened, you are preparing for what may happen later. A late train, a foggy morning, a cracked globe, a sudden need for extra red lamps, a storm that keeps lanterns burning longer than expected. Your hands arrange the room for possibilities before anyone names them. The Buffalo Train lantern filler works in a space where readiness has a smell. It smells of oil, tin, dry cotton, old wood, cold glass, and the faint iron scent that clings to anything kept near rails. The air does not move much unless the door opens. When it does, the outside world briefly enters, and the stored lanterns seem to wait more visibly, as though they have heard their names called. A hook on the wall may hold a cleaning brush, its bristles dark at the ends. You use it for corners where cloth does poorly, around the burner seat, under rims, along the top where soot nests in small ridges. The brush makes a dry whispering sound. Bits of black dust fall onto the bench. You wipe them away, and the lantern looks less tired. Some tasks are done because a rule says so, and some are done because your hands know neglect becomes trouble. The railroad rule book may speak of proper signals, lamps, and colors, but it cannot describe every smudge, loose thread, or stubborn wheel. That space between rule and reality is where your craft lives. You make the written expectation possible in the material world. When we think about why this job faded, this storage corner gives another answer. As railroads grew more standardized and centralized, fewer little rooms needed their own full rhythm of lantern care. Supplies could be managed differently. Equipment could be issued from larger stores. Maintenance could be folded into broader duties. The work did not vanish in a flash. It was absorbed, divided, simplified, and renamed. But here, in the 1910s, you still have your room and your rows. The morning is light enough now that the globes no longer glow from the bench lamp alone. Their colors flatten in daylight, becoming practical again. You adjust the shade, or blow out a small lamp if one has served its hours. The smell of extinguished flame rises briefly, soft and bitter, then fades into oil and wood, and as the storage settles into order, We move with the day toward the cleaning that follows the heaviest use, when the buffalo train lantern filler's bench becomes a place of patient restoration. The rush has passed for now, and the work narrows into careful hands. You gather the dirtiest lanterns together, set out fresh cloth, and let the room become slow again. The dirtiest lantern has a globe nearly brown with smoke at the top. It may have burned in poor draught, or the wick may have been turned too high against wind. You lift the globe and see the soot cling in a soft ring near the upper curve. The glass feels cool below and faintly greasy where smoke has settled. You wipe once, and the rag turns black. Cleaning soot has a particular patience. Press too little, and it smears. Press too much, and you risk slipping. You fold the cloth around your finger and work the inside curve, moving slowly so the glass does not knock against the metal frame. Your breath quiets without your asking it to. The task itself lowers the pace. The rag leaves dark trails at first. Then the color begins to return. Red appears from beneath brown haze, not suddenly, but through layers. The lamp has been doing its work in weather, and now you are returning it to readiness. There is no scolding in this. A used lantern should look used when it comes back. Your bench exists because use always leaves something behind. You may use a little cleaner, perhaps water where suitable, perhaps a dry cloth first, perhaps whatever the shop has found practical. The exact method depends on habit and available supplies. What matters is the result. Glass that shows light cleanly, metal that closes properly, and no leftover grit where moving parts must move. You are not polishing for beauty, though beauty sometimes appears anyway. A clean globe catches daylight in a way that feels almost private. It shows small bubbles or waviness in the glass, tiny irregularities from its making. It turns the room upside down in a curved reflection. Your hands pass across it like shadows. For a moment, the object is more than equipment, though you do not linger too long. The next one is waiting. The buffalo train lantern filler learns to value modest clarity, not perfect clarity, because working objects rarely keep perfection for long. Just enough clarity for a signal to carry its color across distance. Just enough cleanliness for a flame to breathe. Just enough repair for a lantern to swing safely in a tired hand. Work is often made from these enoughs. One after another, as you clean, the yard outside becomes busier in daylight. Voices carry more plainly. A wagon or motor truck may pass beyond the wall. Freight doors slide, chains rattle. A locomotive bell sounds somewhere, measured and bronze. The morning has texture now, not the soft depth of night, but a layered working brightness. You remain inside, where the bench keeps its amber smell. There is comfort in being slightly apart from the largest noise. You are not removed from the railroad, but you are sheltered from its open rush. The walls dull the clatter. The shelves keep company. The lanterns arrive as manageable pieces of a larger world. You cannot control the whole yard, and you do not need to. You can clean this globe. You can mend this burner. That scale may be why the work suits a sleep-bound imagination. The mind can rest inside a task that has edges. Pick up the lantern, look it over, open the frame, remove the globe, wipe the soot, check the wick, close it again, set it with the ready ones. Nothing leaps forward, nothing demands alarm. The work advances by touch. A crack appears in one globe only when the soot is gone. It runs thin as a hair from rim to shoulder. You hold it nearer the light and turn it slightly. The crack catches brightness, then disappears, then catches again. It might have been missed in haste. Now it cannot be ignored. You remove the globe from service and set it with the broken ones. This is how quiet attention prevents future trouble. A rushed glance might pass the crack along to the next shift. A clear look stops it at the bench. The buffalo train lantern filler is not heroic in the way stories often mean. You are careful in a way that leaves no story behind. The absence of trouble is your evidence. When a globe is replaced, the new one changes the look of the old frame. Fresh glass sits inside worn metal, bright and slightly strange. Soon smoke and handling will soften it into the yard's common life. For now, it shines more clearly than its frame deserves. You fit it anyway. Work does not require matching ages. It requires service. And as the cleaning deepens into the late morning, We turn toward the people who depend on these lanterns, not as grand characters, but as passing hands at your doorway. The Buffalo Train lantern filler knows the yard through exchanges, through brief requests and returns, through the way a crew member holds out a lamp without needing to explain the whole night. You hear footsteps again, and the door moves inward. A switchman enters with a lantern whose wick has burned poorly. He sets it down and turns the little wheel to show you how it sticks. His coat smells of smoke and outdoor cold. His glove leaves damp grit on the bench. You nod, because the problem is familiar. You do not need many words. The burner comes apart, and the cause will show itself soon enough. The conversation, if there is one, stays low and practical. A late car, a bad patch of footing near a siding, a lamp that smoked in the wind, someone needing an extra clear lantern for a few hours. These fragments drift through the room, then leave with the worker. You keep what is useful and let the rest go. The bench is not a gossip chair, it is a place of passing service. Still, over months and years you come to know patterns. Who returns things promptly? Who hangs a lantern carefully? Who brings back bent handles too often? Who wipes snow off the globe before setting it down? These are small measures of working character, and they are noticed without being turned into judgment. Your job teaches you to see how people treat shared tools. Shared tools require a different kind of care. No single worker owns the lantern fully, yet each depends on it. It passes from room to hand, from hand to yard, from yard back to room. A shared object can suffer from everyone's haste or benefit from everyone's patience. You prepare it for someone you may barely know, and someone returns it for your attention later. This circle is one of the quiet human details of the Buffalo Train lantern filler. The lamp is a meeting point for workers whose duties differ. The brakeman, switchman, conductor, yardmaster, storekeeper, and filler all touch the same system from different sides. The lantern carries no affection outward, but it carries usefulness, and usefulness has its own gentle form of regard. A worker may warm his hands briefly near the bench lamp before stepping back out. Another may ask whether the red lanterns are short. Someone may leave a cracked globe with an apologetic shrug. You answer without ceremony. The day is full of such minor courtesies. In hard industries, kindness often hides inside practical gestures, because there is no time to decorate it. The old yard is not soft, but softness can exist inside it. A dry rag handed over, a better lantern chosen for a long cold shift, a warning about a loose latch, a cup of coffee left near the door. You notice these things because your room receives the edge of many routines. We can let that warmth remain small, because small warmth often lasts longest. When the burner from the switchman's lantern is opened, you find gum and soot around the wick slot. The wheel turns stiffly because the cotton has swollen and charred unevenly. You remove the old wick, clean the passage, and work the wheel until it turns with a steadier feel. Then a fresh wick goes in. The repair is not dramatic, it is satisfying. You may test it before returning the lamp. The match flares, the wick catches, and the flame lifts cleanly. You turn the wheel a fraction, watching the edge of flame widen and settle. No smoke, no sputter. You lower it again and close the lantern. The switchman takes it by the handle, gives a brief word of thanks or only a nod, and goes back into the yard. Such moments show why the job could not disappear until other systems became trustworthy. A light used for railroad work must be more than bright. It must be dependable in cold, damp, motion, and haste. It must be understood by tired workers. It must fit rule and habit. The oil lantern, for all its mess, had earned that trust through long repetition. Replacing it required more than novelty. And as the workers come and go through the late morning, we drift toward the slow pressure of change, where the Buffalo Train lantern filler begins to share the room with newer kinds of light. We do not leave the bench, we simply notice what appears beside it, because workplaces often reveal the future by placing it on a shelf before anyone speaks of an ending. Perhaps there is an electric fixture overhead now, wired into the building. Its light is steadier than flame, though sometimes harsh. It does not breathe or flicker unless the current falters. It leaves no soot on a globe. It makes the corners more visible and the bench less dependent on the lamp you might once have tended for yourself. Even your filling room is being changed by light that needs no filling. A bare bulb, if present, has its own presence. It hums faintly, or the wires do. It throws shadows in a different shape from a flame. It makes metal look flatter, glass harder, oil less golden. The room gains clarity but loses a little warmth. You work under it because it helps you see, and workers have always accepted useful things even when they change the feeling of a place. Outside, fixed electric lamps begin to claim platforms, buildings, crossings, and yard points where money and wiring allow. They do not replace every hand lantern, but they reduce some need for portable flame. A worker can see farther without carrying light. A signal can be placed and powered. A platform can remain lit through hours when no one trims a wick. The night becomes more engineered. For the Buffalo Train lantern filler, each fixed lamp is not an enemy. It is simply another answer to darkness. You may even be grateful for it when the yard is icy or smoke is heavy. But in the quiet arithmetic of labor, every better lit corner can mean fewer lanterns issued, fewer globes dirtied, fewer reservoirs emptied. The change is practical, not personal. A job built on repetition feels change first as a gap. A shelf remains fuller than usual. A fuel order lasts longer. The wick packet thins more slowly. A crew that once took 3 lanterns now takes 1. Nobody announces a transformation. You notice, because your hands reach for work and find a little less waiting. The bench grows quieter by inches. There may also be improvements in lantern design. Better drafts, better burners, stronger frames, more standardized parts, and more durable globes can reduce maintenance. A tool that does its work with fewer repairs is good for the railroad and good for the worker using it. Yet it also takes small tasks away from the filler. Efficiency often removes friction, and some jobs are made of attending to friction. We should let that thought rest without bitterness. The point of maintenance is not to preserve itself forever. The point is to keep things working. When things require less tending, the world may become easier in real ways. But memory can still honor the tending that came before. The old work did not fail because it ended. It served until conditions changed. The smell of the room might change slowly. Less kerosene in the air, fewer smoky globes, more dust on unused parts. A drawer that once opened many times a shift now opens once. A shelf may be reassigned to other supplies. Paper labels curl at the edges. The filling bench remains, but another kind of work begins to lean into its space. At first, you may welcome the slower hours. Fewer repairs mean fewer rushed hands, fewer black rags, less fuel on your cuffs. But a worker also knows the unease of diminishing need. If the bench is too quiet, someone may decide the job can be combined with another. A lantern room can become a general store corner. A named role can become a duty performed when necessary. This is one way we lost the 1910s Buffalo Train lantern filler. Not through a single invention alone, but through accumulation. Electric lighting, better fixed signals, changed yard practices, improved lanterns, centralized stores, new fuel and battery technologies, and the ordinary desire to save labor all pressed gently on the job. Each pressure was reasonable. Together, they thinned the role. Yet in the moment, you still stand among tools that need you. The future has no right to steal the feel of the present. The oil can is still there. The rag is still dark. The next lantern still needs its burner cleared. We return to that object because sleep, like good work, stays close to what can be held. And as midday approaches and the yard takes on a steadier rhythm, we follow the Buffalo Train lantern filler into the quieter maintenance that fills the hours between rushes. Not every part of the day is crowded with returns and requests. Some hours are made for checking what would otherwise wait too long. You pull a crate nearer, and the lanterns inside shift with a low metal murmur. A crate of spare or seldom used lanterns has a different smell from active ones. Dust lies over the oil scent. The handles may be cooler, the globes cleaner but less alive. These lamps have waited through shifts without being chosen. You lift each one, not because it has failed, but because stored readiness still requires attention. An unused lantern can become unready while no one is looking. Dust enters threads. Wicks dry oddly or stiffen. Old fuel can sour or leave residue. A globe stored badly can crack from pressure. Metal can rust where damp air finds it. Waiting is not the same as preservation. You learn this from shelves, crates, and corners. Everything in a working room needs occasional notice, even things that seem still. You open a stored lantern and smell the reservoir before filling. Old fuel has a stale edge. If it is unsuitable, you empty and wipe as needed, following the shop's practice. The smell rises strong for a moment, making the room feel smaller. You give it time. Then the fresh fuel goes in, clearer and sharper. The lantern returns to useful waiting. The quiet inspection of stored lamps may be the most sleep-like part of the job. Nothing is urgent. The same movements repeat with barely any interruption. Open, check, wipe, adjust, close. Your breathing keeps time with the hinge and cap. A cart passes outside, wheels clicking over some uneven place in the yard. Then the room settles again. The buffalo train lantern filler becomes a keeper of intervals, not only night and morning, but used and unused, now and later, immediate need and future need. A lantern waiting in a crate may matter tonight, or next week, or during a storm no one has predicted. Your care crosses that distance in advance. It is a quiet way of sending help forward. There is something deeply human in preparing tools for a person you may never see use them. A clean spare lantern might be taken by a worker on a miserable night after you have gone home. He may never know who checked it. You may never know it was needed. The work still connects you. It is enough that the object was ready. A small brush clears dust from a burner. A cloth passes over a globe. A wick is raised and lowered once to make sure the wheel has not frozen in place. Your fingers feel each turn with a kind of listening. The wheel should resist slightly, then move. Too loose is not good. Too stiff is not good. The right feel sits somewhere between, and you know it without saying. The room's light changes again after midday. It comes flatter through the window, less blue than morning, less gold than evening. The bench lamp may be unnecessary, but shadows remain under shelves. You work by mixed light, day from one side, electric or flame from another if needed. The lanterns show different faces under each kind of brightness. Objects are never quite the same in two lights. If the weather is wet, coats hung nearby drip slowly onto the floor. The smell of damp wool comes and goes. If the day is dry, fine dust from the yard seems to settle on everything, no matter how often you wipe. The railroad brings the outside indoors in fragments. Cinder, mud, snow, grit, and wind all find their way to your bench through returning tools. This constant arrival of the outside keeps the job from becoming purely domestic. The room is cozy in the way a workshop can be, but it is not sealed from industrial life. You handle evidence of rough work all day. The lanterns bring back smoke, weather, haste, and handling. Your care does not erase the yard. It makes the yard's tools ready to return, and as the slower inspection continues, we let the mind settle into the broader pattern of industrial jobs that vanished in the same quiet fashion. The buffalo train lantern filler was one of many workers whose tasks lived close to a particular technology. When that technology changed, the job's name loosened, then blurred, then slipped from ordinary speech. The next lantern waits, and you lift it by its cool handle. Think of the lamplighter whose street route narrowed when electric lamps spread. Think of the ice cutter whose winter harvest changed when mechanical refrigeration grew. Think of the typesetter whose case of metal letters yielded to machines, then to film, then to screens. Each job held a body of skill, sound, smell, and posture. Each was ordinary while it lasted. Each became picturesque only after it was no longer needed. Your lantern bench belongs among these, but it remains its own place. It is not a street at dusk, or a frozen pond, or a printing room. It is buffalo railwork in the age of steam, with kerosene under your fingernails and freight moving beyond the wall. The specificity matters. Forgotten work becomes real again when we give it a room, a tool, and a pair of hands. A person can understand change better through one bench than through a grand diagram. Here is the old fuel. Here is the new bulb. Here is the full shelf becoming fuller. Here is the ledger line growing shorter. Here is the worker whose knowledge remains true but less demanded. The story of industry is not only invention, it is also the gradual quieting of rooms like this. You do not resent the electric light that helps you see. You do not curse the better signal that keeps crews safer. You do not demand that smoke remain for the sake of tradition. Work has always adapted, but adaptation leaves textures behind, and tonight we are gathering those textures gently before they fade again. The rag in your hand is one of them. The train lantern itself will remain as a symbol long after the filling bench loses its central use. People may keep them on shelves, hang them in restaurants, sell them to collectors, restore their globes, polish their frames, and admire their shapes. But a collected lantern is not quite the same as a working lantern returning wet from a yard. The smell is different. The urgency is gone. A displayed lantern may be beautiful, but it no longer asks for the daily relationship. It does not come back with soot from a long shift. It does not need to be ready by evening call. It does not sit in a rack with others, each one carrying a small account of use. The object survives more easily than the routine. That is why the job is harder to recover. The Buffalo Train lantern filler lived in routine, not in the object alone. The work was the cycle. Issue, use, return, inspect, clean, fill, repair, store, issue again. Remove the cycle, and the lantern becomes a memory of work rather than work itself. We keep the cycle moving in our telling because that is where the calm truth of the job lies. You set the inspected spare back in its crate. The handle lies down with a muted tap. Another comes out. Its frame is sound. Its globe needs wiping. Its wick is too short. You replace it. The motions continue, patient and nearly weightless in the mind, though the hands remain active. The day passes through them without needing to be counted, and when the spare crate is checked and the shelves have been brought into order, we move toward the afternoon, when the Buffalo Train lantern filler's room begins preparing once more for the coming dark. The day folds back toward evening earlier than expected in winter, and even in summer, the yard knows night will return. You look over the ready lamps and begin the cycle again. Afternoon has a waiting quality. Morning's urgency has spent itself, and evening's need has not fully arrived. The light outside may be pale, smoky, or warm depending on season, but your room already leans toward preparation. Lanterns that seem sufficient at noon must be counted again. Fuel levels must be checked. Returned lamps from daytime work must not be allowed to sit dirty into night. You gather the day returns first. They are fewer than the night returns, usually, but they still carry work on them. Dust from a shed, fingerprints on a clear globe. A little fuel sloshed low from hours of use in shadowed places. You open each one and make your quiet decisions. This can go back soon. This needs a wick. This globe should be replaced. The coming evening gives the room a subtle pressure. Not haste, exactly. More like a tide beginning to turn. The railroad's daylight confidence will fade, and portable lights will matter again. You know this from years of repetition, or from months enough to teach the body. The shelf must be ready before the first worker asks. Preparation feels calmer when it begins before the knock. A Buffalo afternoon near the rail yard has its own sound. Wheels grind slowly. Men call across tracks. A hammer rings once, then again, then stops. Somewhere grain machinery may drone near the elevators, and the lake wind carries gull cries faintly above the industrial air. Inside, these sounds arrive softened. Your bench answers them with smaller noises. Cap, hinge, cloth, drawer, pencil. The oil stock is checked before evening. You lift the can, judging its weight. If it is low, you fetch or request more from the proper place. The filled can pulls at your wrist with a familiar heaviness. You set it down carefully. Fuel is not dramatic when handled well. It is simply respected. The cap turns snug. The spout points away from the edge. This steady respect is part of why old oil lighting worked as long as it did. People learned habits around flame and fuel. They knew where to store things, how to trim, when to clean, what smells were ordinary, and what smells warned of trouble. The Buffalo Train lantern filler stands inside that culture of flame, one worker among many who made fire behave usefully. As electric systems spread, that culture did not vanish from the mind immediately. Older workers still trusted what they could see burning. Younger workers might accept new lamps more quickly. Shops might keep oil lanterns as backup long after daily use declined. Change in practical life is rarely pure replacement. It is overlap, hesitation, comparison, and gradual confidence. A new technology must earn the right to be boring. That is when it truly takes over. At first it is noticed, discussed, doubted, praised, repaired, blamed, and watched. Later, it becomes ordinary enough that no one remarks on it. Oil lanterns had once done that. Electric light would do it too. When electricity became boring, the lantern filler's old centrality became harder to justify. You continue preparing the oil lamps without treating them as relics. To you, they are current work. The future may be leaning in, but this afternoon still belongs partly to kerosene. The red lamps must be ready, the spare wicks must be cut. The glass must speak cleanly through dark. Your hands stay with what the shift requires. A good preparation row has a rhythm to its appearance. Handles aligned, caps closed, globes seated, no ragged wick visible, no wet sheen at the base, no cracked glass hiding in the middle. You scan the row from left to right. The eye catches anything out of place before the mind fully names it. This is the sight of a room prepared for night. And as afternoon lengthens toward the first shadowed hour, we return to the reason the lantern itself mattered so much in Buffalo's rail world. The city was a meeting point, and meeting points produce confusion unless signals remain clear. Your work at the bench helped turn that confusion into readable movement. A flame behind colored glass could simplify a dark yard for a few necessary seconds. Rail yards are places of near distances. Cars sit close. Tracks divide and join. Engines move slowly, but with great weight. Men work near machines that cannot stop like a footstep stops. Visibility matters in such places, especially before the era of broad, reliable lighting everywhere. The hand lantern gave workers a portable sign, a small authority carried at arm's length. A lantern's swing could be seen by someone watching from an engine cab, a caboose platform, or the far side of a string of cars. The person receiving the signal might not see the face of the worker giving it. The body could be shadow. The hand could be hidden by coat and steam, but the light, if clean and properly colored, carried the instruction across. That is why your polishing matters. A smoky globe can dull a signal. A weak flame can shorten its reach. A cracked globe can fail when the lamp is needed. A leaking reservoir can make a worker set the lantern aside or handle it awkwardly. Each little defect reduces the trust placed in the object. You restore that trust before darkness asks for it. The railroad's rulebooks gave formal meaning to signals, but the lived practice depended on repetition. Workers learned how light moved in real air. They learned how fog softened it, how snow confused distance, how steam could hide and reveal it in pulses. Your lanterns went into that living practice. They had to be clear enough to survive the world outside rules. Buffalo weather could make this especially plain. Lake effect snow, wet fog, hard wind, and sudden cold all change how light behaves. A flame that seems adequate indoors may look small in blown snow. A globe that seems clean at the bench may haze quickly in damp smoke. The filler cannot control weather, but you can send out the best lamp the room can provide. You might keep certain lanterns for harsher use because they have proved themselves. A frame that hangs well, a cap that seals reliably, a burner that behaves in draft. This is not superstition, but accumulated experience. Tools earn reputation through use. The shelf may look like a row of similar lamps to a stranger, but you know the differences hidden in plain sight. Those differences make the loss more personal. When the job fades, it is not only a category of labor that disappears. It is also the knowledge that this particular lantern is best for a long cold watch, that this globe scratches easily, that this burner needs a firmer hand. Standardization preserves much, but it often smooths away the intimate map between worker and object. Still, standardization also makes safety and supply easier. A railroad cannot rely only on private quirks. It needs parts that fit, colors that mean the same thing, and rules that travel across divisions. The train lantern filler lives between standard and particular. You follow the standard enough for the system to work, and you know the particular enough for the object to serve. We can feel that balance in the next lamp you lift. It is one of many, yet it is this one. It must meet the rule, yet it carries its own wear. You clean and fill it according to ordinary practice, but your thumb pauses where the cap has a known stiffness. The system and the hand meet there, in a quarter turn of metal. And when the evening lamps are nearly ready, we move toward the hour when the room's purpose becomes visible again, as workers begin to arrive for night use. The Buffalo Train lantern filler has spent the day preparing for this slow gathering. Now the shelf starts to empty, and the air by the door grows colder with each opening. You stand near the bench, ready, but not hurried. The first evening worker reaches in almost before the door has fully closed. His sleeve brushes the frame, and cold air slips around him with the smell of coal smoke and damp wool. He asks for a clear lantern and a red, and your hand knows the shelf before your eyes finish turning. You pass them over carefully, feeling the brief transfer of weight from your routine to his. More footsteps follow over the next stretch of time. A conductor wants a lamp checked before departure. A yardman brings one back early with a loose globe. Someone needs a blue lantern for equipment that must stay untouched. The room does not become loud, but it becomes active in a steady, practical way. Each request is small. Together, they make the Buffalo Train lantern filler necessary again. You do not speak more than the work requires. A word here, a nod there, a quiet answer about whether enough red globes remain. The men are thinking about their own tasks, and you are thinking about yours. This suits the room. Workplaces have many kinds of silence, and this one is companionable, built from people who understand that usefulness does not always need conversation. The lamps leave in pairs and singles. Their handles lift from the shelf, and the row changes shape. A gap appears where a clear lantern stood, another where a green globe waited. You notice the pattern without making a show of counting. The ledger will receive its marks, but your eye has already made a private account. A good filler knows the shelf as a face. When a lantern is lit in the room before going out, the flame changes the air around it. The globe warms, and the smell of new heat rises from old metal. You watch the wick for smoke. You lower it slightly if needed. The worker waits, patient, because this is worth the pause. Then the lantern moves out into the buffalo yard, carrying your last adjustment into the evening. Outside, twilight catches the rails in strips of dull silver. Steam drifts across the yard and makes every fixed light seem to spread at the edges. A hand lantern does not conquer that atmosphere, but it enters it with purpose. It gives a worker a circle of knowledge around his boots and a colored sign for someone farther away. You know this without seeing each step. The door shuts again, and the room returns to the sound of the bench. A cap turns. A drawer opens. The pencil moves across the ledger. You mark what has gone out, perhaps by count, perhaps by initials, perhaps by a shop system that belongs to this particular railroad. The method matters less to us than the act. Each mark is a small tether between object and use. The Buffalo Train lantern filler holds a curious position during the evening issue. You are busy because darkness is coming, yet the pace is not frantic. The work has been prepared through the day. The lamps are ready because your earlier hours were not wasted. That is the deep comfort of routine. When need arrives, it finds order waiting. A returned lamp interrupts the issue. Its globe is cracked cleanly from top to rim, perhaps struck against iron. You set it aside and give the worker another without delay. Later, you will remove the broken glass, mark the loss, and fit a replacement. For now, the yard needs a lamp more than a story. You let the damaged one rest on the cloth, quiet and definite. The cracked globe catches the bench light in its broken line. It looks almost delicate now, though it was used among rough things. Glass has this double nature in the lantern room. It must be strong enough for weather and handling, yet it remains glass, still capable of a sudden small failure. Your hands respect both truths, and that respect slows them in the right places. As the evening grows colder, condensation may cloud a globe brought from outside into warmth. You wipe it away and feel dampness on the cloth. The metal frame sweats slightly, then dries. The room holds these little weather changes, as though each lantern carries a pocket of the yard with it. You are not outdoors, but the outdoors arrives in your hands. The rows on the shelf keep thinning. You may bring forward more from the back, setting them where the next workers can reach them. Spare red, spare clear, one green, one blue. The colors matter, so you do not let them mingle carelessly. In low light, a mistake in selection can begin as a small confusion at the shelf. Your order prevents that before it forms. This attention to color sits at the heart of the job. The railroad is full of signs that must stay distinct. A signal misunderstood can ripple through movement, delay, and risk. The train lantern filler does not decide the meaning of colors, but you preserve their visibility. Red must be red when seen through smoke. Green must be green in rain. Blue must keep its authority. And as the lamps move outward and the shelf grows hollow, we shift into the hours when the filled lanterns are doing their work beyond your sight. The Buffalo Train lantern filler remains at the bench, but part of your attention travels with the lights. You imagine them swinging across ballast, hanging beside caboose steps, resting on platforms, and lifting in gloved hands under a clouded sky. A lantern in use is never perfectly still. It sways when carried. It tilts when set on uneven ground. Its flame leans under motion and then rights itself. The reservoir holds its little supply of fuel while the wick draws steadily upward. The globe keeps wind from taking the flame. Every part you checked now answers the movements of the yard. You hear a signal before you see any result of it. A locomotive bell rings once, then again. A coupling strikes. A voice calls something indistinct, swallowed by distance. Perhaps one of your lamps has just been raised in a slow arc, giving permission for movement. Perhaps another has warned a crew to stop. You do not know which, and you do not need to know. The lamps are doing what they were prepared to do. Inside, the used smells deepen. The oil can has been opened many times. The rags are dark. The bench has a faint sheen that catches light at an angle. Your sleeves carry a blended odor of kerosene, soot, wood, and cold air. To someone entering fresh, the smell might seem strong. To you, it has become the background of the evening. The body settles into the second round of the shift. After issue comes waiting, but waiting with readiness inside it. A worker may return at any time. A lamp may fail. A request may come from the yard office. You keep the bench clear enough for sudden use. You keep the tools where they belong. Nothing here is idle in the lazy sense. It is arranged for response. This kind of readiness was difficult to remove from railroading until other systems could take over its function. A fixed electric signal did not need to be issued by hand, but it needed installation, power, inspection, and trust. A battery lantern did not need filling, but it needed charging and cells. Yard lighting reduced darkness, but could not put a portable signal in a worker's hand. Each new answer overlapped the old one. The loss of the Buffalo Train lantern filler came because the overlaps gradually favored the new answers. Not everywhere at once, not neatly. Some yards kept oil lamps longer than others. Some workers preferred known tools. Some budgets delayed change. Yet the direction of travel was steady. Less flame, fewer reservoirs, fewer wicks, less need for a room centered on filling. Still, tonight has not reached that future. Tonight is made of oil light. You pull another returned lantern toward you, feel the warmth near the top, and wait a moment before opening it. Heat lingers in small metal chambers. The globe gives off the faint smell of warmed soot. When you lift it free, the air inside it escapes like a breath from the yard. The wick has mushroomed at the edge, charred unevenly. You trim it with slow accuracy. A little black crescent falls away. The fresh edge underneath looks cleaner, ready to burn without fuss. The scissors close with a solid, domestic sound, almost like a sewing room sound, though the bench around you belongs to rails and freight. Old jobs often borrow sensations from several worlds at once. You turn the wick down and open the reservoir. It is half full, enough for a little time, not enough for a long night. You fill it. The oil makes its small liquid murmur and the level rises in the dim opening. You stop before the lip, because enough is a learned boundary. Then you wipe the cap and close the lamp again. A worker waiting at the door shifts from one foot to the other, but not with irritation. He knows the value of the pause. His boots leave wet half-moons on the floor. His breath shows briefly if the door behind him has let in enough cold. You hand back the lantern and he lifts it once, testing the weight. The exchange is complete. The room has many such brief completions. They are too small to remember individually, but together they make the shift. A wick trimmed, a lantern returned, a globe cleaned, a can refilled, a note made, a worker supplied. Your mind can rest in their repetition, because each task has an end, and the next begins without noise. And as the evening deepens into full night, we move with the buffalo train lantern filler into the part of the work where sound becomes a kind of map. The window, if there is one, shows very little now beyond reflected lamplight, but your ears keep the yard present. You listen while your hands continue, and the railroad arranges itself in layers beyond the wall. The nearest sounds are intimate. The brush in the burner, the cloth across glass, the tap of a lantern base settling onto wood, the tiny rasp of a wick being drawn through metal, a drawer sliding shut, your own sleeve moving against your side. These are the sounds of the room, close enough to be almost inside the body. Beyond them are the corridor sounds, footsteps, a door latch, someone coughing once, a clerk's chair scraping, paper shifting, a voice asking for a name or number. These sounds belong to the building that shelters your bench. They remind you that your small room is not isolated, only tucked into a working network of offices, stores and passages. Farther still is the yard. Wheels bump over joints. Chains clatter. A coupler lands with a deep iron note. Steam exhales. A whistle marks distance more than urgency. The noises come and go, some sharp, some softened by weather. After enough nights you can tell a busy hour from a slow one by the density of sound, even if no one tells you the schedule. The buffalo train lantern filler lives by this layered listening. You do not need to interpret every noise, you only need to know whether the room will soon be asked for something. A sudden rush in the corridor may mean a request, a lull outside may mean returns are coming later. The sound of work shapes your expectations without becoming an alarm. In cold weather, sound travels differently. Metal strikes seem clearer. Footsteps on frozen ground carry. Snow can quiet everything, making a coupling sound farther away and closer at once. In damp weather, the yard feels muffled, and whistles hang low. Your room receives these differences through the walls, and the lanterns bring them in as wetness, soot, or ice. A lantern returned during snowfall may have little crystals clinging to the top. They melt quickly near the bench lamp. Water beads run down the frame and collect near the base. You wipe them before opening the reservoir. Because water and fuel do not belong together, the cloth grows cold in your hand. Outside, the worker who brought it may already be back in the white blur. The blue lanterns, when they return, draw a particular care from you. Their color marks protection around equipment, a sign that movement must not happen while someone works. You clean and store them where confusion is least likely. The blue globe is deep and quiet in your hand, darker than green, less warm than red. It feels almost like night given a rule. Such colors depended on shared discipline. A lamp did not enforce anything by itself. People had to understand it, respect it, and maintain the habits around it. Your work supports that chain. A dirty blue globe or weak flame would not serve the rule as well. So you polish the glass until the color can do its work cleanly, and then you set it back where it belongs. This is another way the job touches safety without speaking loudly about danger. The train lantern filler is not standing dramatically at the edge of a moving car. You are at a bench, with oil and cloth and glass. Yet the quality of that bench work travels outward. Calm work can have serious uses. The calm does not make it less useful. It may make it more so. When newer systems reduced reliance on hand signal lamps, they shifted some of that chain into fixed devices and electrical circuits. A signal could be interlocked. A light could be controlled from a tower. A track circuit could indicate occupancy. These developments did not remove human judgment, but they changed where judgment sat. Less of it depended on a portable flame prepared at a local bench. The Buffalo Train lantern filler was lost partly because signaling itself became less hand-carried in many places. Not completely, and not evenly, but enough over time. Hand lanterns remained for many railroad tasks, especially as backups and portable signals, yet the old volume of nightly filling declined where fixed lights and changed practices took root. The bench grew less central to the railroad's speech. Still, hand-carried light has a stubborn usefulness. A worker can take it into a shadow where no fixed lamp reaches. A portable signal can move with the task. A lantern can be hung from a switch stand, carried along a cut of cars, or brought into a shed. The old tool stayed, because darkness is never entirely conquered. It only retreats from certain places. You feel the truth each time someone asks for another lamp. The fixed lights outside may shine, but a worker still wants a circle of his own. He wants light at his feet, light in his hand, light that moves when he moves. You give him that, in the form your room knows best. The reservoir is filled, the wick is trimmed, the globe is clear, and when the night has settled and the first rush of return slows, we turn inward again, toward the small fatigue that gathers in your hands and the quiet habits that keep mistakes away. The Buffalo Train lantern filler cannot work well on attention alone. You rely on arrangement, sequence, and touch, because tiredness is easier to manage when the room has been taught to help you. The scissors return to the same spot after each use. The clean rags stay separate from the blackened ones. The broken globes do not sit near serviceable glass. The oil can is capped when it should be capped. These are simple rules, but they are kind to a tired mind. They reduce the number of decisions that must be made from nothing. Your body knows the sequence. Check the frame before filling. Check the globe before issuing. Wipe after closing. Mark before forgetting. Set aside what cannot safely return to use. The order protects the work from haste and weariness. A person may be tired, but a well-made routine carries some of the load, like a good handrail on familiar stairs. The light above the bench makes a soft halo on the wood. Outside that halo, the room is darker, though not lost. Shelves stand as shapes. The oil stock sits low and square. The door has a pale line under it where corridor light leaks through. When footsteps pass, the line changes briefly. You look up, then back down. The next lantern waits. Sometimes fatigue makes the sensory world sharper for a moment. The smell of kerosene rises suddenly strong. The metal feels colder. The scrape of a burner seems louder than before. Then the feeling passes, and the rhythm returns. Sleep may be far away for you, the worker, but for the listener beside us, the steady motions can be a soft path toward it. We stay with the gentleness of repetition, because repetition is not emptiness. It is attention returning to known places. The same cap turns differently if grit is in the threads. The same globe wipes differently if soot is damp. The same handle hangs differently if its pivot is bent. Repetition teaches variation quietly, and the skilled hand listens to those small changes. A lantern comes in with fuel nearly gone. The wick has burned low, and the reservoir smells warm and dry. You refill it and think, perhaps, how close it came to failing before return. Not with alarm, only with professional notice. Next time, it may need a fuller start or earlier exchange. The ledger may receive a small mark, or your memory may hold it until the pattern repeats. Industrial work often depends on such pattern recognition. One failure may be chance. Repeated failure asks a question. Why does this burner smoke? Why does this handle loosen? Why do these globes crack more often? Why is fuel running short on certain shifts? The train lantern filler does not need grand theories, but you notice recurrence because the room teaches you to notice. Over time, managers notice patterns too, though in different forms. Costs, losses, labor hours, fuel orders, replacement parts. If electric or battery equipment promises fewer consumables, fewer returns, fewer repairs, and less handling, the accounting begins to speak. It speaks quietly, in columns, but railroads listen closely to columns. A job made of small recurring costs becomes vulnerable to systems that reduce them. This does not mean the old work lacked value. It means its value had to compete with new arrangements. A railroad is a practical organism. It seeks movement, safety, economy, and reliability. If a new system appears to support those aims with less daily tending, the old bench loses some claim. The worker at the bench may feel the result long before seeing the decision. You close another lantern and set it down. Its base lands with a small wooden sound. The row on the ready shelf grows again as returns are restored. This rebuilding of the row is one of the shift's quiet satisfactions. Emptiness becomes readiness. Used objects become prepared objects. Disorder from the yard is translated back into order. Your hands perform that translation again and again, and as the ready shelf fills in the late night, we drift toward the human life around the job, the parts not written in manuals, but felt in the body. The Buffalo Train Lantern Filler is not only a pair of hands at a bench. You are a person moving through hours, weather, meals, paydays, sore wrists, familiar faces, and the slow knowledge that work shapes how home feels afterward. When your shift ends, the smell of oil may come with you. It clings to cuffs and skin, hides under fingernails, and lingers faintly in hair or cap. Soap removes much, but not always all. At home, someone might know from the smell what kind of day you had. The railroad enters domestic space in small invisible ways, carried by clothing and fatigue. Your hands may be clean enough, but still feel the work. A thumb used to turning burner wheels, a palm used to lantern handles, fingertips faintly rough from metal and rag. Even away from the bench, the motions may repeat in memory. People who do repetitive work often carry a ghost version of it into rest, not troubling exactly, just present. Food after such a shift tastes different, depending on the hour. Bread and soup may feel deeply welcome. Coffee may be too sharp or exactly right. The body wants warmth, more than variety, when the night has been cold. If you sleep by day, after night work, the city sounds different through curtains. Wagons, voices, bells, and street traffic become the outside layer, while your mind still smells kerosene. We do not leave the bench for long, but it helps to remember that every quiet industrial role belonged to a whole life. The train lantern filler had bills, whether to walk through, perhaps family waiting, perhaps a rented room, perhaps a boarding house, perhaps a streetcar ride home through Buffalo morning. Work was not picturesque to the worker. It was the day, or the night, to be done well enough. The loss of the job would therefore be felt practically. A duty might be reassigned. A worker might move into another storeroom role, another yard task, another maintenance position, or no railroad work at all. Obsolescence sounds smooth from a distance, but close up, it is made of changed schedules, changed pay, changed pride, and new habits to learn. We keep that in mind gently, without turning the room bitter. Workers have always adapted because they must. A person who once filled lanterns might learn battery care, electrical stores, signal supplies, or general equipment duties. The same careful habits could travel into new work. Clean contacts instead of clean globes. Charged cells instead of full reservoirs. Bulbs instead of wicks. The object changes, but patience remains a transferable tool. Still, something particular is left behind. The orange flame seen through red glass. The oil can's weight. The soot ring at the top of the globe. The dark rag folded again and again. The little shelf gaps during evening issue. The moment a clean lantern leaves the room and becomes part of the yard's moving language. These belong specifically to the old work. The Buffalo Train Lantern Filler becomes almost invisible when described only by economic change. So we keep returning to the sensory facts. The bench edge pressing lightly against your coat. The cool globe in your palm. The cold draft under the door. The smell of a match after testing a wick. The quiet pride of a row made ready. These are the facts sleep can hold. A worker coming in late may be more tired than he intends to show. He sets a lantern down too heavily, then steadies it with his other hand. You look at the lamp, not at his weariness. The globe is whole, the reservoir is low, the frame is wet. You take it into care, and he takes another from the ready shelf. The exchange lets both of you keep moving. There is mercy in systems that work smoothly. A tired person does not have to explain every need. A prepared shelf answers. A known room receives. A familiar worker understands. The railroad is often imagined through force and scale, but its daily life also relied on such small mercies. Your bench is one of them, modest and real. And as the late night begins to loosen toward another morning, we remain in the active cycle a while longer, because the script of this job is not a straight road to disappearance. It is a round of departures and returns. The Buffalo train lantern filler is lost to us historically in part because the round stopped repeating, but here, for now, it continues. You reach for another lantern and the metal is cold. This one has mud dried on the base, gritty and pale at the edges. You scrape it gently with a dull tool or stiff cloth, careful not to damage the metal. The mud flakes onto the bench, bringing with it the smell of wet ballast and yard ground. A lantern is not only a lamp, it is a traveler through the surfaces of work. Under the mud, the base is sound, the cap is tight. The globe surprisingly is clear. You smile inwardly, not as a performance, but as the small relief of finding less wrong than expected. The wick needs only trimming. The reservoir takes a little oil. In a few minutes, the lantern moves from dirty return to serviceable object, and the shelf receives it again. Another lantern has no visible damage, but the burner wheel will not turn. This is the kind of fault that hides from a quick glance. You work it free with patience, loosening old residue and easing the mechanism until the wick moves. The repair takes longer than the muddy base. Appearances are unreliable in both people and tools. The hands must ask their own questions. The room grows warm near the bench if you have worked long under a lamp or near a stove. Your face may feel the warmth while your feet stay cool. The contrast is a familiar winter discomfort. You shift stance, flexing toes inside worn shoes. The railroad outside may be all motion, but your work asks you to stand in one place for long stretches, and stillness has its own fatigue. To ease it, you may step to the shelves, carry a crate, fetch wicks, or open the door briefly. The cold air clears your head. It carries in the smell of smoke, iron, and distant water from the lake. Buffalo's geography is not an abstraction here. The lake makes itself known in wind, damp, snow, and the way cold seems to move through clothing. The city beyond the rail yard is sleeping and waking in different parts. Bakers, milk wagons, night police, hotel clerks, factory firemen, and early laborers all keep their own hours. Your lantern room belongs to that hidden society of work outside the ordinary day. Many people enjoy morning without thinking of those who prepared the systems before dawn. That is common. It is also why such jobs fade from memory. But memory can be rebuilt gently through attention. We do not need to make the job larger than it was. We only need to inhabit it faithfully. You are here with the smell of kerosene and the row of lamps. You are here in 1910's Buffalo, where the train lantern filler's work still has a place. You are here before the old need has fully thinned away. The next worker who enters asks whether a certain lantern has come back. He describes it by a dent and a stiff cap, not by number. You know the one he means. It has not returned yet, or perhaps it sits on the damaged shelf. Such conversations show how tools acquire informal identities. A railroad may number equipment, but workers remember the feel. When the lantern is found, you set it on the bench between you. The worker points to the cap, and you test it. Yes, it catches. You clean the threads, wipe away grit, and work it open and closed until it behaves. He watches for a moment, then looks toward the door, because his own task is waiting. You hand it back when done. The small problem leaves the room solved. The work's simplicity can hide its knowledge from outsiders. Anyone can pour oil badly. Anyone can wipe glass carelessly. Anyone can miss a crack, overfill a reservoir, trim a wick unevenly. or store colors in confusion. The difference between doing and doing well lives in the accumulation of quiet corrections. The buffalo train lantern filler is skilled not because the task is complicated, but because the task is repeated responsibly. That distinction matters when jobs are lost. Simple-looking work is often the first to be underestimated. If a new system promises to remove it, few mourn the lost skill until later, when the sensory world has already vanished. Yet skill can live in simplicity. It lives in timing, touch, order, restraint, and the ability to keep doing careful work after hours of sameness. And as the bench gathers the marks of another long night, we move toward the broader reasons the old lantern room gave way, not as a lecture, but as thoughts that can sit beside the work. The buffalo train lantern filler was lost because railroads, like all working systems, kept seeking light that demanded less daily care. You tighten a cap, and the thought settles quietly beside the sound. Fuel had to be bought, stored, moved, and handled. Wicks had to be stocked. Globes broke, burners fouled. Rags became waste. Rooms needed ventilation and caution. Workers spent time issuing, receiving, and maintaining lamps. None of these burdens was enormous alone, but repetition makes small burdens visible to an organization. What your hands do calmly, the railroad may count as labor. Electric yard lighting carried its own costs, of course. Wires, poles, bulbs, repairs, power, installation, and specialized knowledge all had to be provided, but once installed, it could illuminate larger areas without every worker carrying a separate flame. It changed the distribution of effort. Instead of many small flames being tended repeatedly, fewer fixed lights could serve shared spaces. Battery hand lamps, as they improved, offered another shift. No open reservoir of oil, no wick trimming, less soot, different storage, different failures. They were not magic. They could go dim, corrode, break, or be poorly charged, but they fit a world increasingly comfortable with electricity. They also fit workplaces looking to reduce fire risk, mess, and consumable handling. Changes in train operations also mattered. Better communication, signaling, yard lighting, and mechanical systems changed how often certain hand signals were required and how they were supported. The hand lantern remained useful, but its maintenance no longer necessarily demanded a dedicated filler in every old form. The job could become part of a larger maintenance routine, less visible and less named. The decline of steam in later decades would alter the whole atmosphere of rail yards. Diesel power brought different sounds, smells, schedules, and maintenance patterns. The lantern filler of the 1910s belonged to steam's sensory neighborhood, where coal smoke and kerosene coexisted naturally. As that neighborhood changed, the old lamp room changed with it. The shift was long, uneven, and practical. But we are not yet in that later world. We are still with steam breathing outside and oil lamps moving through the yard. The historical reasons can wait softly in the background while your hands continue. A script for sleep should not push change too hard. It should let change arrive like morning light, gradually revealing what was already there. You set down the repaired cap and reach for the pencil. The ledger receives another mark. The page now carries the evening's quiet traffic in abbreviated form. Someone later could read the marks and know counts, but not the feel of the room. They would not hear the brush or smell the soot. That is why we stay with the work instead of only the record. A drop of oil has found the bench near the can. You see it shining and wipe it before it spreads. The cloth leaves the wood darker for a moment, then the wetness dulls. Such small cleaning happens throughout the shift. A clean bench is never a permanent state. It is an act repeated whenever disorder appears. You keep making the surface ready for the next object. The same is true of the room, the shelf, the tools, perhaps even the worker. Readiness is renewed, not achieved once. You restore it after each use, each rush, each interruption. This is the secret rhythm of many quiet jobs. They do not move toward a dramatic finish. They maintain a condition. The condition is usefulness. and it must be remade by hand. And as another set of lanterns leaves for the yard, we stay with the idea of maintenance as a kind of held breath. The buffalo train lantern filler keeps the old lights between failure and need, between darkness and instruction, between storage and weather. You do not make the trains move by yourself. You make one of their small languages available. A train yard has many languages: bells, whistles, flags, printed orders, chalk marks, hand signs, timetable numbers, telegraph messages, switch positions, and lights all carry meaning. Some are loud, some are silent, some travel on paper, some move through wire. Your lanterns belong to the language that can be seen across dark space and understood by workers who have learned its grammar. Because light is visible, people may forget how much invisible care stands behind it. The flame appears, so the lamp seems ready. But readiness began earlier, with fuel stock, clean glass, a sound wick, a working burner, a frame that protects, and a person who checked them. This hidden preparation is the soul of the train lantern filler's job. You make the visible possible. In time, other hidden preparations replace yours. An electrician checks circuits. A signal maintainer inspects lamps and relays. A battery is charged. A bulb is changed. A control panel is tested. The visible light remains, but the care behind it has moved. That is not disappearance of maintenance. It is migration. The old filler is lost because maintenance migrated into other forms. Still, migration leaves empty rooms. A bench once busy becomes secondary. A shelf once full of globes holds other parts. A drawer of wicks becomes a drawer of screws. The smell of kerosene fades from the wood, though perhaps not entirely. People stop saying the old title because no one new needs to learn it. One day the room's former purpose requires explanation. We are giving it that explanation slowly, through your hands. Not to preserve a museum label, but to let the listener feel why the role existed. A person half asleep can understand a filled lantern better than a table of technological change. The weight, the smell, the small flame, the polished globe, the cold door, the shelf gap. These explain gently. Another return arrives, and this one is still lit. The worker shields the flame as he steps inside, then lowers the wick before handing it over. You take it carefully, feeling warmth through the frame. The globe glows red for a moment, rich and soft. Then the flame goes out, and smoke curls upward. A thin, dark ribbon that dissolves near the lamp above your bench. You let the lantern cool before opening it. The worker waits for another, or leaves if his shift has ended. The extinguished wick smells charred and familiar. A little soot has gathered inside the top. You can already see the work it will need. Nothing is surprising. The lantern has simply returned from doing what it was made to do. The cooling period creates a natural pause. You wipe another globe while waiting. You check a handle. You mark a count. The room teaches you to interleave tasks so time is not wasted and nothing is rushed. This is not efficiency in the sharp modern sense. It is a gentle economy of motion, learned through practice. While one thing cools, another can be cared for. When the warm lantern is ready to open, the metal still holds a trace of heat. You lift the globe free and set it on the cloth. The soot inside is soft and dark. The burner wheel turns well enough. The reservoir is low. You fill it, trim the wick, clean the glass and return the lamp to the ready side. Its brief redness is gone, but the memory of it lingers in the room. And as the night cycles through use and return, we approach the quieter question of what it means to lose a job that did not seek attention. The Buffalo Train lantern filler was not celebrated while the work was common. You did not expect celebration. You expected a bench, supplies, wages, and the chance to do the work correctly. Recognition, if it came at all, came in the form of trust. Trust is not always spoken. It is the worker taking a lantern without rechecking every part. It is the yardmaster assuming the shelf will be ready. It is the storekeeper believing the counts will be close. It is the absence of complaints about smoky lamps or empty reservoirs. Trust becomes visible only when it breaks, which is why good maintenance can seem invisible by nature. When the job faded, That trust transferred to other systems. Workers trusted electric lights, batteries, signals, and new routines once they had proved themselves. The old trust did not vanish, it changed objects. But the particular trust between yard and lantern bench became less necessary. The worker at the bench no longer stood at the same point in the chain. This is a gentle sadness, if we allow it. Not a sharp one, more like finding an old hook on a wall and realizing what once hung there. The hook is still useful for something else, perhaps, but its old companion is gone. The room continues, the railroad continues, the city continues, and yet a particular rhythm has slipped out of hearing. We do not need to resist that slipping. Sleep itself is a letting go of details. But before the detail leaves, we can hold it lightly. Your hand around the lantern bale, the oil can tilt it just enough. The wick edge trimmed flat, the globe cleared until red is red again, the door opening to cold air, the shelf waiting for its row to return. A distant whistle rises outside, long and low. It does not startle you. It has been part of the evening all along. The sound passes over the yard, over roofs, over tracks, over the room where you stand. For a moment, your hand pauses with the rag around a globe. Then the whistle fades, and the cloth moves again in slow circles. The Buffalo Train lantern filler belongs to that fading whistle, not as a famous figure, but as part of the whole soundscape of rail work. The locomotive's voice carries farther, but the small bench helps make the night's work possible. Large noises and small labors belong together. We can let them share the same quiet attention. And when the late returns begin to stack near the bench, we move into another round of sorting, because the cycle does not end simply because the hour is deep. Some lanterns can be cleaned quickly, some must wait for parts. Some are too warm to open, some need only a glance and a little fuel. You create order from the pile, one decision at a time. The late returns no longer feel like an interruption. They are simply the last small tide of the shift, coming back from the dark with soot on their glass and cold in their handles. You sort them without hurry, letting the warm ones cool, setting the cracked globe aside, wiping the mud from a base that has stood somewhere near the wet ballast. The Buffalo Train lantern filler's room has grown still enough now that every object seems to make its own soft sound. One by one, the lanterns return to order. A clear globe shines faintly in the bench light. A red one sits deeper in its frame, quiet and ready. The oil can is capped. The scissors rest where they belong. The rag, dark with the evening's work, is folded over the edge of the bench, and the drawer of wicks slides shut with a tired wooden sigh. Outside, the yard has not vanished, but it has lowered its voice. A distant engine breathes, then settles. Somewhere beyond the wall, a chain moves once and is still. The wind off Buffalo's water presses at the building, carrying smoke, damp iron, and the faint chill before dawn. You listen for a moment with your hand resting on the bench, and there is nothing more the room is asking from you. The old job will fade, as such jobs do, into better lights, fewer wicks, and shelves that no longer need filling in the same way. But tonight, the work has been done in its proper order. The lamps that needed care have received it. The shelves hold their quiet rows. The floor is dim, the tools are back in place, and the last small flame has been lowered into rest.